From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Monday, September 25th, 2023, as we enter the final week of the regular season. The Chicago White Sox are at 60-96, so they're trying to avoid 100 losses here in the last 6 games of the schedule. Maybe they'll avoid 100 losses. We'll see. It's kind of hard to tell what exactly the White Sox are playing for. Maybe it would help them if they did lose more than 100 games, at least when it comes to draft positioning, when it comes to the draft lottery later this offseason during the winter meetings and where they ultimately land. But with the White Sox not exactly clear what they're playing for in these last 6 games, we'll talk about the final homestand, including one topic that I think may stuck up on a lot of White Sox fans. Is this the last week of Tim Anderson in a White Sox uniform? But while the White Sox have nothing to play for, it was a wild weekend in Major League Baseball for the postseason races. Last week, it looked like Houston was going to take control of the American League West and run away with it. Now, after getting swept at home by the Kansas City Royals, the Astros are just a half game ahead of Seattle for the 6th and final playoff spot. We'll touch on the MLB postseason races and preview the final week ahead. Joining me is the managing editor of SoxMachine.com. It's Jim Margulis. And Jim, a great weekend of baseball, especially for these postseason races. Too bad the White Sox aren't involved in them again.
Because they finally won a series.
Yes.
This would have been their time to push. The final stretch, winning 2 out of 3 in Boston. Like, I imagine before the season, we thought this might matter. And now really the only impact it has is whether the White Sox will avoid 100 losses or not. And I'm on record as saying I want the White Sox to lose 100 games just so the record reflects how bad they made White Sox fans feel this season.
Yeah, and as far as feeling bad, even in that win, it wouldn't be 2023 if there was some concerning news. In Sunday's game, that only lasted 6 innings because of weather. Thankfully, the MLB umpires, after a 103-minute rain delay, decided just to call the game, and the White Sox won 3-2.
On account of who the hell cares?
Yeah. Luis Robert of the first inning walked and then stole second base. That's his 20th steal of the season, and he's at 38 homers, so he just needs 2 more home runs to become a 40-20 player. Nobody in White Sox history has done that. However, in Roberts' stolen base attempt, when he did steal second, he slid awkwardly into the base, and he had to leave the game after the first inning. The White Sox are saying it's left knee soreness. We'll have more clarity, hopefully more clarity, about Luis Roberts' health status after further evaluation on Monday. We may get an update before Tuesday's game between the White Sox and the Arizona Diamondbacks. And Jim, it would just be fitting in this dumpster fire of dumpster fire seasons that the one thing that gives you hope, the one thing that makes you happy about this season is Luis Robert Jr. and not being able to see him in the final homestand because he got hurt on a wet field trying to reach a milestone.
Yeah, I mean, we're running out of reasons to really follow the White Sox closely. Like before Robert, it was Gregory Santos going on the injured list, and I wanted to see how he finished the season and whether like he could withstand high leverage work. Before that, it was like Michael Kopech. Will the move of the bullpen help? That hasn't mattered. So really, when you look at like what the worthwhile stories are over the final couple weeks, they're all kind of depressing. Like Dylan Cease is fine, like seeing him end the season potentially on a up note and throwing 32 starts again. Like that's cool. That's good enough. But like everybody else, like, it's either, Elvis Andrus on a roll, but he's an impending free agent. Andrew Benintendi's, not that great, but I mean, like he's kind of being Andrew Benintendi, but like not an impact player. Corey Lee batting 071. So like anything going forward, Andrew Vaughn, like every walk is worth a celebration, but that's not typically something. Yohan Moncada and Eloy Jimenez, like it all comes down to whether they take a wrong step and whether that sets them back a month. So like even if they end up in hot streaks, like they're as basically as good as their next swing or their next sprint. So really when it comes to trying to figure out like where the impact is coming from for next year and how they can turn this around quickly, I don't really know what's left, just because everything else is tenuous and will remain tenuous until like Yoán Moncada and Eloy Jimenez play 3 straight months in good health and impact performances. That's at least how I'm looking at it.
And that's going to be a big thing going to 2024, especially if they're still on the team. That's the caveat. We'll see in just how destructive Chris Getz gets in the offseason. And I cannot wait to see your guys' offseason plans, because I think a large chunk of our readers and listeners, Jim, are going to be very destructive with their offseason plans. Yeah, exactly. Tear it apart, burn it down. But you mentioned Dylan Cease, and in our previous episode, we talked about the new front office hires for the Chicago White Sox. And we're cautiously optimistic of what Josh Barfield could bring to the front office. We are excited about the addition of Brian Bannister and how he could help out with White Sox pitching. And we both talked about it and how Bannister's already got 2 projects joining the White Sox. He's got to get Dylan Cease back to his 2022 form, and he's got to help Michael Kopech be productive after he has this cyst removed from one of his knees. I think, hasn't Kopech got an cyst out of both knees now?
Well, he had the meniscus tear in his right knee.
That's it.
So that was it. So same knee, 2 different operations.
Yeah, great. But with Dylan Cease, though, some optimism. The weather was absolutely awful over the weekend in Boston for baseball. And I think that's it had a huge impact as far as run scoring ability. The White Sox on Saturday won 1-0 because Luis Robert hit like a 290-foot home run. It says 311. But it hit the camera at the pesky pole, like just perfectly placed around the foul pole. And that was his 38th home run, and that was the difference in that game. But Dylan Cease was outstanding, and he went 7 scoreless innings, allowed just 6 hits. He didn't walk anyone. He struck out 11. And that's the most innings pitched that Cease has had since August 13th against Milwaukee, when he won also 7 innings. It's the most strikeouts he's had in a game all season long. And when you use game score, it's the highest game score for Dylan Cease in 2023 since opening day, when he was electric against the Houston Astros. And I was filled with hope, Jim, after that game that, yes, Cease could be a strong contender for the American League Cy Young in 2023. And obviously that did not happen. I still believe when you watch this start on Saturday, and everything's clicking for Dylan Cease, that 2022 was not a fluke for Cease. I think some have resigned that it was a fluke for Cease. I don't think so. I know that there's a big disparity when it comes to wins above replacement between Fangraphs and Baseball Reference, because Fangraphs uses fielding independent pitching FIP, and there Cease is a 3.5 WAR pitcher. So if I bring on an analyst from Fangraphs, they're going to say Cease is a 3.5 WAR pitcher. That's a good pitcher. You bring somebody else that uses Baseball Reference, they would probably disagree with you, as his FIP this year is 3.79. That's good, but his ERA is 4.66. And Cease's strikeout rate did drop by 3% from 2022 to 2023. And the BABIP, the batting average in balls in play against Cease, last year was 260. This year it's 331, which is alarmingly high. That's a career high for Dylan Cease. So hitters were far more successful, and they were striking out at a lower clip against Cease from last year. But when you bring somebody in like Bannister, who's going to parse through the data and try to find advantages for the White Sox pitching staff, I still believe in Dylan Cease. And we need reason to hope and believe in any part of this White Sox organization they're going to turn around in 2024, Jim. And Cease is still one of those pieces on this White Sox org that I still believe can be a frontline starter.
I'm curious what you mean, like when you say that the Cy Young season wasn't, or you think it wasn't a fluke. Like, I think it was a fluke, but only like because of how many guys he walked. Like, trying to finish second in Cy Young voting while leading the league in walks is pretty tough. So I think the extremes of his success were fluky, but I also don't think he's as bad as he showed this year. And it's funny, like if you average 2 years, the last 2 years, so like a peak year and then like a disappointing year, his FIP between those 2 years is 3.43. In 2021, it was 3.41. So basically, like, this whole season has been an exercise in regression to where, like, this is kind of what it looks like. Or the other side of it, when you're leading the league in walks, or might be if Michael Kopech didn't exist, and you're trying to get by with like hit suppression. And when you don't hit 99 with regularity like he did before, like, he's been missing a tick or two off his best fastball all year, and that might be making the difference in terms of like a guy who allows 3 hits over 7 innings and a guy who allows 6 hits over 7 innings plus 3 or 4 walks. So that's why I think is interesting about Bannister, because like one thing that jumped out to me and didn't get a whole lot of attention just because the White Sox have so many problems that how can you pay attention to just one? But like when it comes to like Lucas Giolito saying like, I enjoyed my time in Anaheim, even if it wasn't bad because they helped me rediscover velocity. And sure enough, like he was up 1.5, 2 ticks with his fastball. So that's concerning because Lucas Giolito and Ethan Katz, like Ethan Katz was supposed to be Lucas Giolito's guy and like the guy who can figure out how to put him back on track. So if he can't figure out Lucas Giolito, like how can he get to the root of Dylan Cease's issues? But like perhaps like Katz is stretched too thin, and maybe bringing in Bannister to be somebody above him who can maybe help bring in players who are better suited or need less work, less labor intensive for Katz to maybe be able to concentrate on just 1 or 2 things versus like redoing somebody's entire mechanics or, you know, his entire like pitch mix, rather than just like, hey, throw this one a little bit more, throw this one a little bit less, etc. Like that might help him, just because like when you look at everything he had to work on, you know, Cease missing a little bit of peak velocity and having control problems, Michael Kopech having control problems, Lance Lynn having a knee issue and then trying to figure out what works after that. Like just a lot of guys had active issues that maybe like he should have been able to help, but also if everybody's on fire, perhaps you just have limited resources to try to put out one emergency after another. So maybe Bannister, if they keep Ethan Katz, and I assume they will at least like maybe bring Katz down to his pay grade, or, you know, maybe, he's no longer asked to do everything while being only a pitching coach at the major league level, and having somebody above him makes it, you know, not have to be the agenda setter for the entire organization and who the organization brings in.
What I don't think is fluky with Cease is still his swing and miss ability and the fact that he takes the ball every 5th day, Jim. I mean, this is 3 consecutive seasons of 30 plus starts from Cease.
32, yeah, 32, and then this is probably 33. So like, yeah, that can't be overrated, his ability to just take the ball no matter what. I think maybe expecting like a top 3 Cy Young finish, just given all the walks, that's, I think everything clicked in place for him to have a 2.20 ERA in 2022. And then like, maybe he's more of like a low to mid 3s guy when he's working normally.
In the American League, though, if you are a low 3s kind of guy, I mean, we're talking about a 4 to 5 WAR type of starting pitcher.
Oh, yeah.
And depending on how the cookie crumbles or how pitchers' arms hold up, you could still be part of the conversation. Like the fact that Cease seems to have a rubber arm, the fact that he still has the strikeout ability. I'm not saying Cease is having a good 2023 season. I'm searching for optimism here, folks. There is something to build upon to give one hope that Dylan Cease could bounce back in 2024, especially if you are adding someone like Brian Bannister, and Cease showcased that on Saturday. This isn't us trying to convince ourselves that Jesse Schultz could be a number 5 starter when he's been disastrous this month and he hurt himself. He's out for the rest of the season because he was running pregame sprint Saturday on a wet field. Like, what are we thinking here? It's been raining all weekend in Boston and we're running sprints on a wet field and he hurts his calf and now he's out for the year. Like, it's a different type of conversation where we're like grasping for straws if some of these fringe guys could actually be regulars. Where, yeah, Dylan Cease was not that great in 2023. He took a step back. But Saturday's game, and there's been glimpses this season, he still has that type of potential just need a better infrastructure in place for him to be more consistent. And that's what the White Sox will need from him in 2024, either to help contend or pitch so well in the first half, Dylan, you get yourself traded at the deadline to a contender for your last year and a half under team control before you become a free agent and you make a lot of money.
Yeah, with Scott Boras as his representation.
Yeah, exactly. Dylan Cease continues to make 32 starts in the next 2 years, and he still strikes out 200 or more batters. He's making money. He's making money.
And good for him.
Yes, good for him. So for the White Sox last homestand, if you have an original schedule, you need to cross off Monday's game because that game has been pushed to Thursday. So the White Sox today on Mondays, you're listening to this podcast, have the day off now because the Arizona Diamondbacks and New York Yankees, like I mentioned, bad weather in Boston, bad weather all along the mid-Atlantic part of the country. The Diamondbacks and Yankees had to push back one of their games over the weekend to Monday as a makeup game. So the White Sox have Arizona Tuesday through Thursday. The Tuesday game is a night game. It is a 6:40 p.m. Central Time game. Wednesday and Thursday are afternoon games. These are 1 o'clock games for the White Sox. Thursday, the game that got moved from Monday to Thursday, $1 tickets and free parking. So if you are retired or you're going to play hooky from school or work, there you go. It's not going to get any cheaper for you to attend a White Sox game on Thursday. And the White Sox wrap up their season at home against the San Diego Padres Friday night, last firework night of the season, 6:40 p.m. Central Time. Saturday night, 6:10 p.m. Central Time start. I know there's going to be some big tailgates in Lot B. Our friends from the 108 are co-hosting a big tailgate in Lot B. So if you do attend that Saturday night game, it's going to be a big party at the stadium. It's also Hispanic Heritage Night as well on Saturday. And then on Sunday, I still love this, Jim. Everyone in Major League Baseball plays at the same exact time, 2 p.m. Central Time in Chicago will be the last game for the White Sox and Padres. So, Jim, final 6 games of the season for the White Sox in 2023. Bless up. What are you looking for? What are you watching for in these final 6 games?
Well, hoping for a 2-4 record to get to 100 losses. So it reflects poorly on everybody. Aside from that, yeah, it's difficult. Like, I guess, Yoan Moncada, cool. Andrew Benintendi, cool. Like, Elvis, like, just, respectable efforts. I like seeing Brian Shaw pitch 3 out of 4 days just because, like, it is nice to have a reminder of just, some guys wanting to play still and wanting to maximize his opportunity. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, otherwise pretty slim pickings. Like, I guess Touki Toussaint's been throwing well, and given that Schultens is out, and even before Schultens got hurt, like, he was more or less, I feel bad for Schultens just because I guess Zach Remillard would be his position player equivalent. 29-year-old rookies were good for like 3 weeks or 3 weeks equivalent of pitching, like 50 innings. And like normally over the course of a season, you get that kind of fill-in work. Yeah. Like, thanks, Zach Remillard. Thanks, Jesse Schultens. Like, that's exactly what we need. Now here's Mike Clevenger back, or here's Lance Lynn back. Good job. Pat on the butt as you go back to Charlotte or go in the bullpen or go to the bench, what have you. But like, just because of all the problems elsewhere and then trades later, just like they were needed to become like average or passable or watchable, and just asking too much from them. So like in another year, in a better season, like maybe 2021, where they got all those perfect patches over the course of a season, like Zach Remillard would have been a perfect patch. Same thing with Schultens, but alas. So yeah, I guess like when on the pitching side, like, yeah, I guess Touki Toussaint's probably the one I'm looking forward to most, just because we had the P.O. Sox question about like Schultens or Toussaint, like who matters, who can stick. And, I thought like Toussaint more than Schultens, just because like he can get by pitching ugly. I agree. Schultens can't get by pitching ugly. And like Toussaint like pitched really well. And like he was throwing strikes and minimizing his pitches, didn't get many whiffs, but like he seems to get weak contact with just his array of pitches. So like, I think every start, every inning he throws is valuable, just to know, like, is he a 5th starter guy? Is he a spot starter? What, can you count on him holding down a spot if you're trying to acquire 3 other pitchers already? So I guess like he's kind of there. And then I think like we'll see what kind of reception some guys get in the final homestand. Like Tim Anderson, that's kind of weird. What he might be going the decision about him. Eloy Jimenez, he seems like he's had kind of a trade bullseye on his back in terms of the way Chris Getz has talked about the players he wants or things he wants to avoid, and they all seem to describe Eloy Jimenez. So I guess as the season winds down on the position player side, it's more about like, are these guys playing their last games? And if so, do fans care?
Yeah, you touched on a lot of things that are on my list. I'm wondering if Brian Shaw pitches in every remaining game for the rest of the season, all 6 games. Andrew Vaughn is one double shy of reaching 30 for the season. I know some people will make a big deal about that. It's not that big of a deal, but it's a milestone.
Nice round numbers.
Nice round number. 20 homers, 30 doubles. Still falls short what other quality first basemen are doing in Major League Baseball, but at least he has finally reached those milestones. But you bring up Tim Anderson, and is this the final week of Tim Anderson in a White Sox uniform? That is a big question, because while a lot of people have been saying, well, he's been hitting better. So in the last 15 games, Tim Anderson's hitting .309, and he's got a .345 on base percentage. The problem, Tim Anderson slugging .327 during that stretch. These are all singles. In the last 30 games, if you zoom out more, he's batting .267 with the .309 on base percentage and slugging .336. His season OPS is still below 600 for the season. And there have been 27 shortstops in Major League Baseball who have played at the position 75% of their games and have had 250 or more plate appearances. Using wins above average, not wins above replacement, but using wins above average, which average equals the average major leaguer, Tim Anderson ranks 27th out of 27th at minus 3.5 wins below the average major leaguer. And even using wins above replacement, he's below replacement level. But boy, when you see a minus 3.5 wins below average major leaguer, and the guy who's 26th on the list is Brandon Crawford, and the San Francisco Giants are planning to say goodbye this week to Brandon Crawford and give him a cap tip as he rides into the sunset as his career ends. And there's great memories of Brandon Crawford with the Giants winning multiple championships, but they know, and he knows the writing's on the wall. And third on the list is Paul DeJong, and he's played for 3 separate teams this year. I don't know what to make as far as this decision for Tim Anderson. Like, there is what you hear from scouts, and scouts will tell you what their eyes and what their gut and how they feel about a particular player. And then there's your analytics department, which tries to get rid of the subjective feeling that you could have about players and just look at the hard, cold data. And sometimes the hard, cold data makes cold-hearted decisions that could greatly backfire, because we are talking about human beings playing a sport, Jim. And that's why you need to have a good balance between an analytics department and a scouting department. But when you're talking about Tim Anderson in the offseason, because Chris Getz has already alluded to this is a big decision, maybe his first big decision as general manager of the Chicago White Sox. 10 days after the World Series, he needs to decide what he's going to do with Tim Anderson's contract option. A scout will tell you Tim Anderson has been good, and he's been dealing with some nagging injuries, but we still believe he's got the ability because he's demonstrated. But if I bring up Baseball Savant or public available data, all the alarms are going off, Jim. Red flags, all the alarms are going off, just like they were last year when we were talking about a similar conversation with Jose Abreu and his impending free agency. And yeah, Houston paid him a lot of money, but I remember you and I talking about he's regressing, he's having trouble with velocity. I don't know if it's a smart idea to bring back Jose Abreu. Ding, ding, point for us. Jose Abreu is the worst first baseman in Major League Baseball, because those are still big issues for Abreu with the Houston Astros. And even though Anderson's 30 years old right now and he turns 31 next season, there's just so many alarms going off looking at the cold-hearted data, Jim. I don't know on how you try to balance this out between looking at it analytically and looking at it from a scouting perspective, because I could see both sides are right, but is it worth going through this circus again?
Yeah, I mean, like Anderson, the two numbers that jump out to me, 300 slugging percentage. Like most seasons, you hope he hits 300.
Yeah.
Now he's slugging 300 exactly. The other one is just like one homer in 507 plate appearances in guaranteed rate field. Like just, it's hard to look past those and say like, this is a major league starting shortstop worth $14 million a year. Because when he doesn't have those things, like his defense isn't good. Like that's been rough, and he's made like he had that weird brain cramp or just like timing issue with Trevor Story, like beating out a single because he took like 2 or 3 steps to get the ball in his mitt and the throw was late. Like there are these mistakes here and there that like didn't sink him when he was batting 300 because like, oh, he makes some athletic plays and, you know, makes some plays that other shortstops can't make, and he hits really well. So you don't focus too much on the occasional playable ball he mishandles because everything else is good. But I just don't know what he does well now. I guess running is still an asset, but he doesn't get on base to do that. You know, like that's the whole conversation about needing more athleticism. And it's like, if you're athletic and you don't get on base, then what are you doing? Like Adam Engel, like having a whole bunch of him on the roster, athletic as hell, but also like just not in a position to use it. So that's why, like, I think if they are looking at 2024 as like a season where it doesn't matter, like payroll's just melting off the books, they might trade Dylan Cease, then sure, pick up Tim Anderson's option. The infield market's lousy, whether you trade him during the winter or you trade him during the deadline or even in May, if it gets that early. Like that's probably more valuable than letting him go and then trying to find a shortstop on the market that everybody else is looking and scratching their heads at. So I can see that. But if they are looking for like a quick turnaround and contending and they have some ideas, I guess like I'd be okay with it just because like if he bounces back, like sure, but that's cool that he bounced back, but also then he's a free agent after that. So like there aren't any lasting ramifications of a big Tim Anderson rebound in 2024 because then he's on the market himself. And the White Sox will have to decide whether to re-up at retail rates after paying him under, you know, well under market in some cases, and not doing anything to build the team around him or, you know, use those savings to solve other positions. So it's tricky, but just, I think with Abreu, the thing is, even though he had like a down year in his last year at the White Sox, like he was still driving in runs. He was still the consummate professional. Nobody questioned his effort. And, you know, he gave some pretty blunt quotes about the state of the team, but he was doing his best. And like, you know, just, you could see that as wearing on him. Like Anderson just, it's not that same thing just because like the production's down and he's had the off the field stuff that Abreu didn't have. That makes you wonder, like, you know, you knew where Abreu's head was at, you know, all the time, even like though he dealt with some certain, like, you know, defecting from Cuba, being separated from his family. Like, you know, he had some things he was playing through, but he never invited the question of where's his head, the way Anderson has this season. So like, you know, if they wanted to change the culture and say like, well, we need different leaders or we need different people who are not the most tenured White Sox. You know, we can't have Anderson being among the most tenured White Sox because like the Padres are experiencing the same thing right now with like the best players being not leaders, or the longest tenured players, the most established players not being leaders, and nobody below them, you know, knowing what to do. Yeah, I think it's partially just, you know, I think there are some similarities, as I wrote about on Sunday, like with the Padres having AJ Preller through so many losing seasons. Like bad habits and bad employees build up to where you can't solve problems quickly if things start turning south. But yeah, if they wanted to say like, yeah, we can't really just deal with this clubhouse mix anymore. And one of the easiest ways to solve this is by taking the money we're going to allocate towards Tim Anderson and then trying to use it on some different players. Like I might understand that, especially if like the 300 slugging percentage is here to stay.
Elvis Andrus this year has a fielding run value of 5 runs above average. Tim Anderson is -3 runs below average. This is the second worst defensive season for Tim Anderson in his career since 2017, when he was all over the place, but that was his first full year in the major leagues. Like, And he bounced back in 2017 from having his best defensive season in 2018. And he was above average in 2019, 2020, 2021. But, last year, tons of injuries for Tim Anderson. This year, he's going to play over 100 games for the Chicago White Sox. And again, the alarms are going off. Like, if he plays every game this homestand, it'll be 125 games this year. We do not know if he's even going to reach a 600 OPS. It's $14.5 million or $1 million buyout for the White Sox to move on from Tim Anderson. If you're a big Tim Anderson fan, even though it's conflicting because you do understand that this has been a bad year for Tim Anderson, this might be it. This might be the final week of Anderson in a White Sox uniform. And maybe that motivates you get to the stadium to see Tim Anderson one last time in a White Sox uniform before the ball club moves on from him. And that's what it would be, because Anderson really doesn't have any say in the matter. It's totally up to Chris Getz and what the White Sox front office wants to do. But even if they do bring him back, in order to be a top 10 shortstop in Major League Baseball, you got to be worth 3.5 WAR. And according to Baseball Reference, Tim Anderson is at minus 1.8 wins above replacement. So he's almost 2 wins below replacement level. And I just mentioned he's already 3.5 wins below a league average player. Tim Anderson will have to be 5 wins better than what he is right now. That is a gigantic leap for a 31-year-old shortstop who does not hit for power anymore and is losing defensive ability, and he's losing that ability via range, which was his number one skill set when he became a major leaguer, was his athleticism. Again, the alarms are going off, and I think we have made a very good case, without saying it directly, Jim, that this probably should be the final week of Tim Anderson in a White Sox uniform, unless he's cool moving over to second base. If he's cool moving over to second base in 2024, then keep him. But if he's not, then I think you got to move on.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what options they have for shortstop. Like, they should be open to moving Anderson to second. There just might not be any better options. That's why, I don't know. I don't have strong feelings about it, just because if they do say, the shortstop marks is terrible, we're just going to bet on him rebounding and then we can trade him. I'd get it. And if he has another miserable season, it's just more of the same and kind of what you're expecting or what you were conditioned for, a possible outcome. So, that's fine. As long as they're trying to just extract what they can from the assets of the old core, and 2025 is really the year they're looking towards building something. So I think he's going to be a little bit of a bellwether for just exactly how much Getz wants to accomplish in year one, whether it's actually winning games or whether it's just being a different team and trying to eliminate as many of the cornerstones or just the foundation, saying, well, if he can turn around and if Eloy Jimenez can stay healthy, year after year, if Yohan Moncada can, just trying to say nah, we just don't want to wait for that anymore, and he makes that call and, maybe invite some risk in terms of Jimenez finally staying healthy for somebody else or Anderson bouncing back. I'd at least appreciate the willingness to say it wasn't going to work anyway, and we just want to get a head start on trying to rebuild something new. I would just be more open to that argument if Pedro Grifol weren't around. But since he is, I'd just be more fine with, just saddle Grifol with the same guys and just, drive him nuts for another year. I'm still I don't know what's likable about Pedro Grifol. So he's just kind of
now
there.
You just want to torture him.
Yeah, kind of a little bit. No, but just or prove that, give him the same guys and do a better job this time. Let's not make it easy on you. You're supposed to, help with the whole effort and attitude thing. So just turning over half the roster and probably making it worse to some degree. And seems to be bailing him out a little bit. And we're still not going to learn if he's a decent manager or whether just they had to eliminate all the difficult obstacles for him in order to be passable at his job.
If you do bring him back, if you do bring Tim Anderson back, I recommend learning how to time travel and finding the 2019, 2020 Tim Anderson. That's what he would have to perform at to get back to being a top 10 shortstop in Major League Baseball. There's just so many quality shortstops. And for him to get back to even a level where teams would want to trade for him, and that's why I'm laying this out, folks, it's a huge leap. It is a big jump in production that even when people are saying, yeah, he's hitting better, to a point, he's just still hitting singles. Like, there's so much wrong with Tim Anderson. There's a lot of soul searching this offseason, whether he stays with the White Sox or not. There's a lot of soul searching for Tim Anderson and what he needs to do to get back on track, because he's so far off the rails right now. And we'll see. I would guess this is probably I'm going to guess this is the final week of Tim Anderson in a White Sox uniform. I would say the White Sox are probably side to taking that $13 million and seeing if they can find a short-term solution, and then hope that Colson Montgomery is ready to take over in June or in July. I think that would be the White Sox plan A. And you may say that's a terrible plan A, Jim and Josh. And you know what? It is. But we're trying to think like the White Sox, and this is exactly how they handled right field last year. And in no way, shape, or form did that blow up in their face, Jim.
Yeah. One thing I'm wondering is like what kind of relationship Tim Anderson has with Jerry Reinsdorf.
This isn't Jose Abreu.
Yeah, it's like, because I could see like, Getz being, it's not, but just like he's been around long enough to where like it could be he could be important enough, or like, I guess established enough to where like Getz is like, yeah, I want to let go of Tim Anderson, and Jerry Reinsdorf says like, hell you will, or I'm not giving him away for free. And then like, he just kind of extends the relationship the way he's done that before with other people. So
I didn't think about that. That's a good point.
Because he hired Getz, because he hired somebody he knows, because somebody he probably can exercise control over, unless Getz is really good at managing Reinsdorf in the sense of like pretending he's contributing when he's actually not. Like that's seems like it could be an X factor that I don't know how to assess, but like one thing I'm curious about if they do retain him, was it Jerry Reinsdorf's idea, and Getz has to be like, yep, that's a great idea, boss. And because no other front office would hire him to be the general manager at this time.
Yeah. Wow. Not exciting topics to discuss in the final week of the 2023 regular season, but you know what? That's not our fault. It's their fault. It's the White Sox fault for dragging us down this road in the final week. So you know what? Let's stop talking about the White Sox. Let's talk about what is going on elsewhere in Major League Baseball with the postseason races after a crazy weekend, next on the Sox Machine podcast. The biggest acts are visiting Chicago this summer, on top of all the baseball games and other great concerts, theater shows too. It can be quite the chore and headache trying to secure tickets to all of these shows and events. Buying tickets shouldn't be stressful. Use Game Time to purchase your tickets. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for sports, music, comedy, theater near you. They've got killer deals on last-minute tickets, and their best price guarantee helps eliminate stressing over tickets. If you find tickets in the same section or even row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. That's why Game Time is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country. Download the Game Time app, create your account, and get $20 off your first purchase using our promo code SOXMACHINE. Terms and conditions apply. Again, create an account and use our promo code SOXMACHINE for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. All right, so let's talk about the Major League Baseball postseason races. And when we last spoke with you guys, the Houston Astros, I wouldn't say had a comfortable lead, but they were the number 2 seed. And we thought they were going to run away with the American League West, take control, win the division. Why? Because Seattle and Texas were playing a 3-game series against each other. And the Astros were at home and facing the Kansas City Royals. An opportunity for the Astros to pad their lead. Well, a funny thing happened in the state of Texas. The Rangers swept the Seattle Mariners. And the Rangers have caught fire again. They have won 5 straight games. And then a very funny thing happened in Houston. The Astros got swept at home by the Kansas City Royals. It's one of those, you can't predict ball, Jim. The Astros finished 39-42 at home in 2023, and the American League West standings as we speak entering the final week look like Texas at 87-68. They have a 2.5 game lead over the Astros, who are 85-71, and the Astros are currently the 6th seed in the American League postseason, and that would be resulting in a first round series against the American League Central champ Minnesota Twins. The Astros are just a half game ahead of the Seattle Mariners. And who plays this week, Monday through Wednesday? Astros at Mariners. Verlander against Luis Castillo on Monday. Christian Javier against George Kirby on Tuesday night. And Framber Valdez against Bryce Miller Wednesday night. If you have nothing planned and if you're going to be staying up late Monday through Wednesday, boy, you really want to watch these games because so much is riding on the line. And Jim, just an absolute crazy weekend in the American League West. And if we were a national baseball show like Cespedes Barbecue and all the other great podcasts that cover the game nationally, this is the A block on what happened in the state of Texas, because this changes everything. Where I thought maybe Texas could sneak in as the 6th seed and Seattle is left out, and you had Texas left out. And now all of a sudden here we are on Monday in the final week, and Texas is looking at having a bye in the opening of the playoff. And here it's gut check time for the Houston Astros as they go to Seattle this week.
Well, and also like Seattle, like they have to be reeling a little bit because like that whole conversation about like the Mariners and Rangers, like they're both kind of scuffling, but they also have the best argument for controlling their destiny. Like a sweep is potentially devastating. And sure enough, like the Rangers, now they've won 5 in a row because of that sweep. And they're now 3 games ahead of Seattle. Just, putting just all those 3 games went to a direct margin. So and now Seattle gets the tough assignment with Houston, or maybe we'll find out if it's tough given the way the Royals played them. But it's such a tone changer, you would think, for the way the Mariners are regarding it. Because even if you lose 2 out of 3, that's still just a 1 game difference. Like you can make that up the next day with just a win and a loss. All of a sudden it's tied again. And then you have that next weekend, the 4 game series, and you'll see what happens. But losing all 3, we've seen the White Sox do that against the Twins. I'm thinking in a few years where September baseball at the Metrodome, and all you need to do is win 1 and then they get swept, and it's just devastating. And I think that's, kind of going on with the Mariners right now. And then the Astros are just, it's, Jose Abreu hitting for power, but not average. It seems like he's kind of gone into, I got to make my power numbers respectable. It's got to come from somewhere, kind of like late stage Frank Thomas, just when his ankles didn't work anymore, and just does me no good to hit singles. So I'm going to sell out for homers. And then hopefully my career average stays above 300 by the time I'm retired, because I'm batting 250 ish. They've gone without Jose Altuve. They've had some injuries here and there. But still, when you see Chas McCormick stepping up, they've had some performances out of nowhere that would seem to be the typical Houston resourcefulness. But for some reason, it just seems maybe it's just the division's better, so they can't get away with just being bullies in the division. But I'm surprised by them. Even if I didn't like them necessarily in the postseason, I thought they would still have enough to, I guess, control the Rangers and the Mariners, because they have their own big question marks.
Here is the crazy thing. Seattle getting swept by Texas, maybe not that big of a shocker, because the Mariners this year, I think, have only won 1 game against Texas. They're 1-9 against the Texas Rangers this season. And I'm going to fact check myself in that. But while the Seattle Mariners have been terrible against the Texas Rangers, they have been fantastic against the Houston Astros. The Mariners are 8-2 against the Houston Astros. And the Astros took care of business against the Rangers.
So it's rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to get at. Astros beat Rangers, Rangers beat Mariners, but Mariners beat Astros. And here you are in the final week, and back to controlling your destiny. And I don't want to put pile dirt or shovel dirt on the Seattle Mariners, because They got this 3-game series against the Houston Astros, who they've been very good against this year. And maybe that helps the Mariners. If they win that series, they leapfrog the Astros into the playoffs. And then all of a sudden entering the weekend, Houston's on the outside looking in. But then Seattle finishes this season at home against Texas. So Seattle's not leaving here. Mm-hmm. And we know that it could be a tough place to win at Seattle. Well, the White Sox did win their series at Seattle, remembering that, the Zach Remillard game. So, it's just fascinating to me, especially these 3 games. I'm going to stay up. I know it's school nights, Jim, but this is what gets me excited about baseball is when you have these big series. There's so much riding on the line, especially Monday night when you got a fantastic pitching matchup with Justin Verlander against Luis Castillo. It'll be 8:40 p.m. Central Time for first pitch, but man, you can't miss it. If you love baseball, despite being a White Sox fan, and they give you plenty of reason to hate the sport, but if you still love baseball, it's going to be worthwhile, especially Monday through Wednesday, and watch our tone and what we were talking about with the American West could completely flip again later this week.
Yeah, I feel like I'm out of my depths talking about the AL West with just how we keep getting it wrong in terms of which team is controlling it. But when I listen to other podcasts or read other things, everybody's surprised. Nobody knows what to expect. So we're all just kind of calling it from the seat of our pants and not necessarily having any kind of strong hunch, or at least any strong hunch would be mistaken probably, because everybody has bad weeks. So that's kind of fun. I will be missing Monday's game because I'm going to a concert that night, but otherwise, yeah, I'd be flipping in and out of games. And I'm really hoping that by the next weekend, that nothing over the next 3 games upsets a perfect game 162 scenario, all games starting at the same time where we're watching 4 games at once, doing the multi-screen on the MLB TV or different screens, just because, even with the tiebreakers not being able to create game 163s anymore, this is probably the next best thing in terms of having 5 teams going for 3 seats, or having some kind of crazy late season surge, see if they can finish it off, or whether the Houston or the Cubs can hold on when they've wobbled late. A lot of drama. And it's nice when you don't really feel that drama, because you can just enjoy it and root for chaos, knowing that you're not living it because you've been dead inside for months.
Texas is at the Los Angeles Angels to start this week. Again, the Angels do not have Mike Trout or Shohei Ohtani.
So watch them sweep the Rangers.
Yeah, exactly, right? That's how it's been going to the American League West. While it's Texas at Seattle for the final weekend, Houston at Arizona for the last weekend. And we'll get to the Diamondbacks here in a moment, as they have a big series, at least for them, against the White Sox. In the American League West, the Orioles are 2.5 games in front of the Tampa Bay Rays. There's still a chance for the Rays to catch the Orioles, but the Orioles are going to finish the season at home. They got 2 games against the Washington Nationals, and then they have a 3-game series against the Boston Red Sox, and there's just not a lot going on for Boston right now. Meanwhile, Tampa Bay is going to finish the season on the road. They'll have 2 games at Boston, and they finish the year north of the border in Toronto for 3 games. So I think Baltimore should be clinching the American League East and the number 1 seed, Jim. I think that's a safe assumption at this point.
Seems like they're playing, they're saving their best for last, and they've had a strong finishing sprint when, we talked about, did they add enough at the deadline? Did they supplement? Will the young guys be able to survive 6-month grinds? Will they be able to survive pressure situations? And seems like they are. So joke's on us.
Yes. So, again, that's the battles in the American League right now. All eyes are in the American League West. And for Toronto, just keep doing what you're doing. As long as they're not part of this conversation, they're still in the playoffs right now. Looks like they're firmly in the 5th seed. They don't want to be part of this mess. So if you're the Blue Jays fan, you want that team to keep winning. Now, maybe just as chaotic, the National League wild card. We've been talking about this for weeks. And right now, the Phillies, they're safe right now. They're 87-69. They're going to be safe. They're going to be the number 4 seed. They're going to host the first round. Arizona they have this important game against the Yankees on Monday. They're currently 82-73. They're just a half game ahead of the Chicago Cubs for the 6th seed. Again, the Cubs don't have any tiebreakers. So if tied, the Diamondbacks would be the 5th seed, Cubs would be the 6th seed. Miami, a game back of the Cubs. They're 81-75. And Cincinnati got a little emotional in Cincinnati over the weekend, possibly saying goodbye to Joey Votto for Reds fans. They're currently at 80-77. They're 2.5 games back of the wild card. Arizona's got a full week, and they got the makeup game on Monday in New York. Then they got to go to Chicago and face the White Sox Tuesday through Thursday. And then they got to go back home and have 3 games against a very desperate Houston Astros team. This is a tough week for the Arizona Diamondbacks, and I thought they were in a good situation, Jim, to make the postseason. And it's looking like you're going to need 85, 86 wins to make into the postseason for the National League. So the Diamondbacks have to find 3 to 4 wins here. Maybe we'll just chalk up the 3 wins against the White Sox. But they still will need to grab a couple extra wins this week. This is a tough journey for them. Like, this might be one of the tougher journeys in the National League for these teams in the final week, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, like, looking at the American League picture, that's like the argument for expanding the postseason, because like Houston, Seattle, they're good teams. They're kind of knocking each other around. So like, yeah, extend that into October and have that drama continue. The National League, I think, is the argument against expanding the postseason, because when you look at the top 4 seeds, like Braves, great. Dodgers, great. Milwaukee, very good. Philadelphia, very good. And then there's like a big drop off in terms of like teams I'm interested in the Diamondbacks. I'm interested in the Marlins and so forth, but they always they felt short. Like Cincinnati has felt like a little bit short, and they just had a brutal loss that really, dealt them a blow. The Marlins might be without Jake Berger. It's hard to know how long he's going to be out, but like they all feel like they're hanging on by a thread. The Cubs, seem to have are on a little bit of an upswing after it looks like the bungee cord might not kick in time, and look like they were plummeting out. So like, I'm not sure if any of these teams are good or whether just the National League is top heavy, but the zero sum nature of baseball requires like a number of teams to finish above 500. And these are the ones. So yeah, like I was hoping that like one of these teams, between maybe not the Cubs, but like the Diamondbacks, Marlins, Reds, would provide a bigger finishing kick. And instead it's the San Diego Padres, who are maybe too little too late, but have won 9 out of 10 just when it looks like they were going to fall apart. And now they're talking about whether they should run it back with a pretty much similar core, because they're showing now what they can do. A little bit disappointing. I enjoy the drama. I enjoy the scoreboard watching, but I wish I just, given when October comes around, I like knowing these are 2 good teams. And now when it comes to beyond Philadelphia, I'm not sure if these teams are any good or if they're just okay. And there's just a lot of bad in the National League to offset the very, very good teams at the top.
I know I said Arizona's got a tough week, and they do, just because of the amount of travel that they have to do. The Chicago Cubs, 3 games at Atlanta, not impossible. Somehow the White Sox won a series against the Braves in Atlanta. And then 3 games in Milwaukee against the Brewers. And you could bet the Brewers, even though they may have the division wrapped up, they will try their damnedest if there's a way they could influence the Cubs not making the postseason. Because again, the Brewers are the number 3 seed. If the Cubs are able to make it as the 6th seed, it'd be a really weird situation. The final weekend of the season, Cubs at Brewers, a day or 2 off, Cubs against Brewers in Milwaukee for the first round. It's 6 straight games against one another. So the Brewers and the Braves will have a lot to say on how the National League wildcard unfolds, especially for the Cubs. And the Cubs this year, not bad on the road. They're 37-38. So they go 3-3 in the last 6 games. Again, that gets them at 85-77. And I think that might be good enough. Miami, 3 games at the Mets, 3 games against the Pirates. They have the easier stretch of games here. And they haven't been that great on the road. They're 35-40 this year away from Miami. And then the Cincinnati Reds. The Reds, I think they got to win out to get themselves in a position here, Jim. Again, they're 80-77. They win out, they're 85-77. It's 2 games at Cleveland, Lucas Giolito's going to be making the start on Tuesday for the Guardians. And then it's 3 games at St. Louis. Now, the Reds are 42-34 on the road this year. They're a better team away from Cincinnati. And it just makes me wonder, man, could the Reds catch fire here and use the motivation of the big standing ovation from Joey Votto, and Votto telling Reds fans that they're not going to quit, they're going to fight into the very end? Could this young team try to help this veteran get back into the postseason for one last ride? This is where I agree with you. Whoever's the 5th or 60 in the National League, probably a first-round exit. The quality's just not there from them to make a deep run. But Arizona, Chicago Cubs, Miami, and Cincinnati, this is the chaos.
Yeah.
This is where things could get really chaotic for the final week, and I thank them. I thank them for bringing this chaos into our lives.
Yeah, I mean, Cincinnati's kind of embraced that role the whole time, like just being, super frisky, super athletic, making some really dynamic plays and pulling some wins out of nowhere, and then like having some weeks where the reason why they're projected to be unremarkable at best show up, and they're running a little bit thin. So yeah, I mean, they could turn it on. I think it's asking a lot, but I don't really have a feel for like which one of these teams can take care of business. Like Miami's had some problems against the Mets, I think, or I think they had that great series against the Braves, and then they kind of flopped against the Mets. So they have up and down. And when you look at their run differential being 50 in the red, and the Reds are in the red, and the Diamondbacks are in the red, Cubs are the only ones with the positive run differential in the group. And it's like, it does reflect how thin their margins are, even if, they win the games they win. But when it comes to trying to figure out like how they can make it easy on themselves, they don't. And, I think that's something I appreciate when it comes to the Braves and the Dodgers. The way they go about it is how easy they make it look sometimes. Like, oh, the Dodgers are, terrible. Or there's a lot of struggles here. There are a lot of questions about the rotation, and they're like 60-36. And I want to know what that's like. And because that sounds like amazing to just be worried about, like, will they get to the, will they win the NL pennant? Like, versus like, will they even make it? Like that, it'd be great to know what that's like. But like Milwaukee, same thing as like, I've given up on figuring out why Milwaukee's going to be good. I just assume that they are like not great, but always good because they're resourceful. And, we'll see what happens when David Stearns and who knows if Craig Counsell goes, but like they're great at problem solving. So I just trust their ability to solve problems. But like beyond Philadelphia, like I wish I had a feel for one of these teams to where like I want to see them in there just because they feel like they deserve it. Maybe like the Reds have that emotional pull for the reasons you mentioned, and the rest are like, it'd be kind of neat. The Diamondbacks are kind of plucky, and the Marlins have, it'd be great to see Kim Ng get in there and Jake Berger help drive it. But like for the baseball, Cincinnati is the one that like I think is just, actually exciting and volatile enough to make crazy things happen. And the rest are just like the best of an unimpressive bunch.
We'll be covering as far as what will be happening this final week of the 2023 season. But yeah, again, we'll be watching with you guys. And I may launch the watch party room, the playback room, to watch some of these games with you guys as well. Why not? If we have the technology, we could all watch together. So look forward to those updates with the final week of the regular season. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you just discovered the Sox Machine Podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. We also upload our podcast episodes into our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. You can follow us on social media. We're at Sox Machine, and I'm at SoxMachine_Josh, no matter what the platform is. Blue Sky, X/Twitter. I'm still gonna call it Twitter. Facebook, Instagram, Threads, whatever it is, we are there, and you can follow us at Sox Machine. If you enjoy our work and you want more, you can get more by becoming a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/Sox Machine, where our Patreon supporters get exclusive content, and they also get ad-free versions of both the podcast and website. As Jim mentioned, the P.O. Sox mailbag is a exclusive content for our P.O. Sox members that get to submit questions to Jim, and he answers them in a mailbag style. So if you want that exclusive content, again, you can sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine. Monthly plans start at $2, or you can save with an annual subscription. The Sox Machine Podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're on for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.